Hello, all. Welcome to Actual Play, our first game of Crossing Worlds, also known as Karma in the Dark. I am super excited about playing this game, and I need to remember to mute myself so I'm not hearing myself in loop. That's good times. All right, turned off. We're pros here. We got a whole new cast tonight for this game, so why don't we start off? How about you, Brian? What's up with you?
Hi, I'm Brian. I am video editor in Seattle, and I'm super excited to play the new version of this because I've played several playtest versions of this game with Cass and Craig, partially, and I haven't done it with the new setting that she's come up with. So that's really cool.
How about you, Greg?
Oh, hi. My name is Craig. My pronouns are he, him. I'm very excited because I play a lot of games because of the holidays. This is my first tabletop in 2019, and I think it's a good choice for my first game. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, good call. How about you, Gian?
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Jian Shim. My pronouns are she, her. If you have Twitter, I am posting a lot there. It's just my name, JeeyonShim. And I'm super excited for this game. It's also my first tabletop of 2019. I haven't played any kind of Blades in the Dark related system, but I've heard a lot about it and I've been really excited about it. And this world is so exciting for me. So I'm really, really stoked to be here.
Cool. And how about you, Cass?
So I'm Cass. My pronouns are she, her, and I've been working on the game for a couple years now, so it's exciting to play the new version. And I think this is also my first tabletop of 2019, so good way to get started.
Yeah.
I do have a Twitter, which is on the interface. You can follow me there. I mostly tweet out pictures of dogs.
I mean, we need more pictures of dogs, honestly. The world is a trash fire. Anything we can do to make it less so, it's worth it. I'm Sean Nittner. I use he, him pronouns. You can find me at Sean Nittner pretty much everywhere and streaming here. I'm really excited to play this game. Cass showed me a version of it, I think, more than a year ago, and we've been talking about it since then. And I'm really stoked to play it. This is not my first game of 2019, but my first game was Mutants of the Night, so I think it's okay. It's still in high caliber games going on here. So yeah, we're gonna start this game up. So I'm gonna switch us over to the Roll20 sheet so we can.
Awesome.
What do we do, Cass?
All right. I was going to say Mutants of the Night was my first watched tabletop game of the new year. So
very cool.
So I thought I would read a very short intro to the world, and then we'll jump into world creation where we'll fill in some more of the details and kind of get going from there. So this is sort of the base setting. In the far future, humanity has perfected artificial fabrication technology. We're able to terraform planets, repopulate worlds with Earth wildlife, and produce any necessity with a fabricator. Our planet was one terraform project of many, until our rush to gain wealth from our new world led to the accidental creation of a disease that killed more than a quarter of our population. The Interstellar Union placed our planet under quarantine. Our fabrication and astrotech travel were disabled with a kill switch, and the overseers dictated regulations on every aspect of our lives. They co-opted the feed to supervise our compliance, an unblinking surveillance system that watches and catalogs every moment of every life. For generations, the planet-born have negotiated for an end to the quarantine. For generations, we were told to follow instructions and regulations, and then faced reinterpretation whenever we filed proof of our compliance. As for us, we are the 7th generation since the quarantine began. We know that following regulations will never change anything. So now we need to find a new way to freedom. We need to resist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So badass.
So the first thing we do is the general world has been created, and this is a change if you followed the game before, but you still fill in some of the details. So for players, if you see under creation rules, there's world creation summary, and we're just going to kind of go through this real quick.
Cool.
So the first step is the game mixes a lot of fantasy and dystopian fiction. And fantasy tends to be very epic and has a lot of sort of fantastic elements like Star Wars. And dystopian can be a lot more focusing on like consequences and realistic struggles. So as a group, we want to decide sort of where we want to set the tone for the game between more like fantasy and epic and a little more cartoony versus the more dystopian side where it's a little more realistic and focusing a lot more on the consequences of your actions.
Okay.
I like realistic, personally. You know.
Yeah, I'm a fan of characters who can try and punch up very hard, and they can try for things that are perhaps unreasonable in a real world, in a real world scenario, but the consequences for failure, the consequences of their actions are very real and impactful. So I like the fantasy element of that. There's like some hope, because I feel the need of a little bit of hope, but I'm also a big fan of consequences being terrible and grueling.
Sure.
Anyone else have a feeling on the spectrum?
I mean, yeah, no, that sounds about right. I think the consequences should carry a lot of weight to them. I am a little, so in the summary of world creation under like detail your dystopia, is that what we're looking at under what is it, 4?
So right now we're on number 1.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yes, and then we'll go into detailing exactly how oppression is showing up in the world.
Got it. Cool. Okay. Awesome. Then yeah, I don't really have anything opposing to say.
All
Yeah,
right.
I think like maybe like a middle ground would be kind of cool. You know, like Sean was saying, you know, consequences, but we have that ability to achieve things that are probably outside of a normal person's scope.
Totally.
All right. So one of the things the game does is we'll kind of communicate through this throughout the game. And so the game uses something called the script change tool, which is by Bo Sheldon. And what it does is any player can invoke basically one of the 3 script changes. Pause is, you know, hey, let's just stop the action and talk about what's going on, or I just want to check in with people about how this is going. You can also call for a rewind. So if something already happened that feels off in terms of tone and comfort, and that could be something you did or something someone else did, you can always say, hey, can we just rewind and actually kind of redo how that played out? And then fast forward. So if something's coming up that you're like, yeah, this can happen, but let's not like focus the camera on it, you can always just request to fast forward and we'll kind of skip through to the next part.
Cool.
All right.
Love it. I just put a link to it in chat as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. So one of the things in the game is when you take certain actions, you're more or less effective depending on a couple of different factors. And one of those is your social standing, which is called relevance. So this is the idea of like, kind of in this world, how much do people really care about what you have to say and how things affect you? And so you are going to have a relevance between 0 and 3. And that's based on 3 different traits that we decide now. So there's 6 possible ones. And for the players, if you scroll down to kind of the end of the world creation summary, it gives a lot more details. But to briefly go over, you can have relevance based on geography, which is if you live in certain parts of the colony, then you're just respected more and sort of considered of a higher status, and it's hard to move around. Another one is credentials, and because the epidemic that killed so many people was caused by a mistake, then credentials have become extremely important, and you need to have credentials to be considered sort of safe and a valuable worker. Another possible...
A question about that one, Cass. So, but credentials mean that you are in the system, as it were, like, or does it mean that you have a certain level of education? Does it? What does it mean to have credentials? I guess is funny.
So it's exam based kind of. So the idea that like you've proved you're competent for this job or these types of jobs through exams.
Awesome.
Though there definitely be people who've like never taken a single exam, so they're effectively not in the system at all.
Okay.
Third one that you guys can choose is information access. So everybody connects to the feed, which is this digital sort of surveillance system that everyone can use. And if we choose information access, it means that how much you can access the feed or how much control you have over that is limited. So your link to the feed is given to you by a corporate sponsor. And if you don't have enough status, then you get kind of I think of it as like the free to play version where you have kind of limited access to the feed, maybe don't have as many features. Or if you have like the developer version of a feed link, then you can not only see the feed, but change things and do whatever you want. Fourth one is magic. Because we'll get into it, magic is considered part of the infection and part of what's wrong with the world. If you guys choose this, then it means that magic users kind of society-wide are not trusted or sort of seen as still infected by what's wrong with the planet. And then if you don't have access to magic, you're considered more quote-unquote normal or healthy. Fifth one you guys can choose is property. Because this is going to be a colony setting, sort of on a space world, limited real estate, people who own property would be seen with more status and maybe be protected from some of the regulations, things like that. And then the last one you can choose is heritage. So the game assumes that all of you are planet-born, but your families coped with the quarantine in different ways. And so depending on how your family coped, you might be seen as more accepted by the overseers versus those who are less trusted. And again, there's details of different heritages, but we'll also go over that in character creation.
Cool.
So we pick 3 of these, 6 to be the relevance factors for our game.
Yes. So 3 of them will not matter really for the setting, and then 3 will sort of define your social status.
Cool.
Okay.
So any of these like means repression stuff that feel fun to rail against for anyone?
I'm actually super into magic. I think it creates like that slight fantasy tone, but also like a class division already in terms of like intrinsic abilities that people might have in a way that's like interesting to me.
I was going to say magic too.
I like that as well.
Yeah.
It's one of the less controllable, right? It's part of your identity. It's part of who you are. Like you could change where you lived or what what exams you've passed, but if you are magical, that is who you are, and it's not so I like that as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, I like heritage for those same reasons too. Like you're kind of born in something, and there's no way you can really decide who came before you. And I feel like heritage really defines you as a person. That nature versus nurture kind of thing. So I like magic a lot personally, but I also like heritage as well.
Yeah.
Cool. Then I think I'm down with heritage as well. I think that they're interesting things to have as both different factors. Like I could see how you could be really on the crap end of the scale from a position of like how the intersections of marginalization. Like if you're both from a heritage that is of low relevance and you're magical, then I can see that like those different kinds of repression like interlocking.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to throw one then that isn't based on that and throw in for credentials, because I think that enlightened people like to say that meritocracies are fair and not realize the total inherent bullshit along with it, like all the privilege that comes with a meritocracy, because people don't have the same level of access and the same education, so they're not on the same playing field. So I think like adding that in as a way for like society to feel good about themselves, like, oh well, we respect everybody who's gone as far as to get themselves an education, even though those educations may be really, really hard to get for some people, etc.
Yeah.
I like that too. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and one of the things the rules assume is when you pick a factor, it kind of changes how it shows up in the world. So for credentials, if you guys decide that determines relevance, then your world requires you to have a sponsor to sit for an exam. So there's kind of this idea that you need to know somebody, quote unquote, who's qualified to vouch
Right.
for you before
Mhm.
you're even allowed to sit for the exam.
Nice. What do you think, Brian? Did those sound
Yeah.
good to you, or
Very much so.
awesome?
Nice. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is just fill in sort of the visual touchstones for the colony. So one of the things about the world is it was originally settled by 7 different multinational corporations, and they each got kind of their own space and got to terraform it in their own way. So for your starting colony, we're going to decide what the main biome is, like what the main ecosystem is where your colony is. So there's a couple listed there, but also if there's something not there that you're like, I think this is a really cool environment, I want to have this be there, feel free to chime in.
I mean, I'm most familiar with cold, rainy forest personally.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Are we going for like one shared biome, more or less, for the sake of the game?
So each colony has kind of their own contained biome.
Right.
So as you in the game, as you would move to a new colony, we kind of decide like what's the biome here. So you kind of
Right.
make it up as you go.
Yeah. Um, uh, I'm very ready to be shot down because this is sort of like very on the nose. But given that in the geography of this world, like each colony is broken up into what I'm imagining as concentric rings, like the districts, and the outer worlds are sort of like the least desirable. Like the further out you go, I imagine the biome being like harsher and harder to live in, or like and or have like scarcer and scarcer natural resources. Um,
I can
and
also
that
assuming less terraformed, like
less terraformed. Yeah,
right,
yeah,
like with things that are just like that's not actually really safe for humans to live on,
Mhm.
but you know,
Yeah,
it's kind of safe. It's kind
Mhm.
of
Yeah,
Yeah, I like that. That sounds like a really
Yeah.
cool idea. Like,
I imagine, and it is there's no. It is very true that I have a love affair with this particular form of rock formation, but I imagine a lot of like weird moraines, which are like these giant
yeah.
like rock outcroppings where like they're huge rocks that are scattered around, and you can kind of like make your way through them. But then if things shift, they're super dangerous because like they can slide down, they can crush structures, they can pin people between them, and I can imagine like that's kind of what the world was like, these like broken up giant rocks that like got turned into other things but were right on the edge of that, so there's still
Mhm.
a lot of those penetrating the colony that we're in.
Yeah, I'm almost imagining like the Red Rocks in Utah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
mm,
totally way to like feel like alien and not welcome by the
totally. Yeah, but also like very starkly beautiful as well. I think there's like a lot of that harsh beauty here.
Oh, those are cool looking. Oh, wow.
Yeah,
so
I
I
want to camp out there so much. Yeah, they're
so
beautiful.
our choices are tundra, forest, scrubland, grassland, desert, or tropical rainforest. Feel like
Are you saying this?
in
Oh,
the
okay, I see it. Yeah,
world, yeah.
yeah,
Um,
I mean, I like the suggestion of that kind of rock canyon
yeah,
land. I think we could definitely do that, and that's kind of fun to play around with.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, I think it technically would be a desert just by virtue of a desert not having a lot of rainfall and not necessarily being sandy um, or anything else. Um, but yeah, cool. If that fits, I'm all
yeah,
about it.
yeah, it sounds really cool. I like that.
Nice.
yeah.
So then the next question for kind of the visual touchstones is picking the primary fashion aesthetic. And if you're like a clothes person, we can lean into that. Or if you're like me and you're a big architecture nerd, then it can be like, are the buildings. And if we think of like the rock mountain habitat, like are the buildings built to go along with that? Or did they try to make very skyscrapery, quote unquote, like civilized cities in the middle of this terrain? Or what's sort of I guess, the visual touchstone for the colony?
Mm.
I like the idea that they tried to make the like buildings that just ignore the terrain, but like the further out you go, the less effort they put into it, and the more you just have to deal with the terrain out of
Yeah.
necessity.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
like
imagine like maybe, oh, sorry, Brian, did I cut you off?
Oh no.
Okay. My camera is like maybe like 2 or 3 seconds behind other people's,
Oh,
generally speaking, in group chats. So just so you guys know. Um, uh, yeah, I imagine it almost like the closer you are to like capital city resources, the more like monochromatic and artificial, like kind of sartorial dominant color patterns are and silhouettes are. So in like fashion designers terms, like maybe a lot more like Yamamoto, right? Like Yoji Yamamoto. But then the further out you go, the more color, like the more reference to like natural landscape, like whether it's earth tone or jewel tone or like even like in Utah there's like that bright blue sky and then like all the like desert colors but then that red rock, and so it can still be dramatic but there's more like life in it almost. um that's kind of how I imagine it, and then like softer maybe garments that are more breathable because of like the harsh weather and more layers to like be able to adapt to both the heat and the extreme cold.
And do you think that sort of due to lack of resources, do you think that it's a lot of like natural fiber colors, like,
Yeah.
or do you think that the like do you what let me rephrase that, are the like the real extreme colors that you're talking about, do you envision those as part of the fashion, or do you envision those as part of the scenery, like in
Ooh,
terms of the aesthetic?
kind of both, kind of both. Because like fashion is like always a statement, right? Like it always like means something in terms of like the cultural class and background and like what people are trying to communicate with what they're wearing. And so if your character, for example, is like someone who like if your heritage, you're deciding to lean toward fugitive, I imagine like family clothes being really colorful and really bright and
Mm-hmm.
like very closely mimicking colors in the natural landscape as like a point of connection and like visual rebellion against the status quo, which is very monochromatic, like
Mm.
harsh black, silver,
Very sleek and
sleek, reflective, even maybe like artificial and synthetic materials, versus like fibers that are made out of like giant, drought friendly or drought resistant succulents that have like high fiber content within them that can be like woven into like tough but breathable textiles, things like that.
cool.
yeah, it's really imaginative. I could never think of something that vivid.
Yeah, I dig it. I dig it. Is that like, I'm trying to like Google image something to like find something that would be of the nature, but I visually I can conceive it. I'm just not sure what to
I
call it.
mean, like one cultural marker that I suspect all of us can maybe like key into is like Rey when you first see her
Mhm.
in the first new Star Wars, not the Last Jedi, but the one Force Awakens.
Right.
And you see those like kind of long gauzy layers.
Yeah.
But like all of those can be bundled up to be warm at night. Um, but then during the day, if it's like harsh and hot out, ooh, that looks like a cool link. Yeah, totally, Cass. Yeah, absolutely. Um,
Awesome. I'm gonna throw
yeah.
that into a chat.
Mhm.
This is
Yeah, Yamamoto's a great reference. For like that
oh,
capital city look. And you know what? Like in the out, sorry, I love fashion actually a lot. Like I'm really interested in it. And even in the outer rings, like in the outer districts, I imagine there's still like class status stuff. So I'm imagining like maybe like 2006 through like 2012, like Alexander McQueen, like the ball gowns as like it's still natural materials, but it's like an excess, right? Like they're still like unnecessary
yeah.
stuff.
Well, I think since we're talking about this like caustic environment, enough clothes to be protected from the like the hazards of the world seems like practical, and anything above that would get gratuitous, right? Like, if
Yeah.
you're like, I'm gonna add more layers, then that can really be a status symbol. Like,
Yeah, totally.
that can be like, yeah, I don't need all this, but I have it.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna wear it.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally. Um,
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
part of the world kind of assumes that the overseers and like their sort of estate of people might have access to technology other people don't. So that would kind of play into the fashion too of like how do they even create that? Because no one else can.
exactly. Yeah. The like prizing of scarcity is still very apparent, I think, in something as mundane as like outerwear.
Adam in chat said, "I'm wearing more clothes than you own," which, having played a game with Adam, where very important.
That's very good.
I can appreciate that on several levels.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Before we get too deep into this whole, but as a reference, if I can make like a shout out really quick, my friend Sadia did a lot of like the fashion stuff for their Blockbuster LARP Event Horizon that goes into like all of the environmental and like class reasons for like the reasons why certain planets in that world like wear what they wear. So that's a lot of what I'm drawing on for like environmental impact on like how cities look and how people look.
Yeah.
If we end up playing a future version of this game or like continue in this world or whatever, like I'll throw that up at the end or something. Maybe.
Awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
No, I'm just gonna link it in chat because
Oh yeah, for sure.
people are into it.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I could talk about fashion and buildings forever, but I'm gonna move us
Let's
on
move
to
to
the next one.
Yeah.
The lovely hole.
Thanks for indulging me, guys.
Yeah. All right. So, how far did you guys get? Well, we got to step 3 in describing the world. We haven't made characters yet, but we know what our fashion looks like.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We know our winter look for sure.
Sorry. That makes me think I want to add one more thing. I also think we should have very extreme seasons. Like, I think another part of terraforming not being complete is that winter is like ice cold and summer is like redonka hot, and so fashion has to change accordingly as well. Like, there's
That's very glamorous for us, glamorous for like Bay Area people like you and me, Sean.
Totally. We're like,
just like
68 to 72. That's my comfort zone.
Yeah, I was thinking today, I'm like, oh, it's about 10 degrees. I should put on a hoodie. All right.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, so the next part is defining how magic works. So one thing that's a little unique about the setting is magic isn't this kind of inanimate power. It's tied to living beings and your relationships with them. So before the world was terraformed, there's a creature that Planetborn have come to call the Source that is just kind of an omnipresent, intangible force that's sort of connected to everything living on the planet. And then there are also sort of creatures in other dimensions that were there before the terraforming that we'll talk about later. But one of the things that made the quarantine worse is as the disease was starting to get taken care of, suddenly these sort of freak supernatural events started happening, and they were driven by the Source, which is rebelling against some part of sort of what the overseers brought in and are trying to control. So this will affect how, when magic rolls go wrong, sort of how the Source acts out in a lot of different ways. So it can be sort of challenging humanity trying to dominate on the planet. It can challenge the idea that there's a difference between the living and the inanimate. It can be trying to challenge sort of order and predictability that's gotten excessive. It can challenge tyranny or control, challenge violence or disharmony, or challenge materialism or waste. So to give like an idea, if we said that it was challenging materialism or waste, maybe when magic goes wrong, terraforming reverses in a spot, or maybe suddenly new life blooms, or maybe suddenly a very wasteful person gets sick. So it's kind of how the Source is fighting back, and that'll come out in how magic is sort of going wild in your environment.
I really like that particular idea. Not to say that we need to do this, but the fact that we've made magic one of the relevance factors totally makes sense to me as to why people in like the center wouldn't want magic to be around if the outcome of magic going wrong is the terraforming being undone, or like the natural world sort of re-exerting itself, because they're like, cool, we have this plush, nice, very like good air and good climate and all this stuff, and when a person who uses magic comes and messes something up, or they make a mistake or something goes wrong, it actually undoes that, and it threatens our stability and our like, it's a very concrete reason as to why magic would be sort of persecuted if it was seen as a threat to the stability of the terraforming. So I'm not married to it at all, but I like that idea. I like the idea that we tie the negative outcomes of the magic to the sort of oppressive factors.
I like that a lot too.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at this list of, sorry, did I just talk over somebody? Okay. If we're looking at this list of like 6 possible like primary agendas, the one that like really struck me, I think maybe because we're talking about like, you know, I'm wearing more clothes than you own, is materialism or waste.
Mm-hmm.
And also just like the visuals of that are really compelling to me as potential, but I want to hear what other people might be drawn to as well.
I like materialism and waste too, but not just with the excess of clothing, but also what John said about, you know, terraforming being undone.
Exactly. Yeah.
And like the exam sort of centric, credentials eccentric factor sort of ties into that too. You know, if you want to control things, you want to make sure people who are doing the magic are trained enough to control it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I sort of dig that. I dig that notion, Craig, of like that maybe magic is needed, but it's needed to preserve the status quo, but they're trying very hard to like keep control over it.
Mm-hmm.
This is in no small part from reading from N.K. Jemisin's
The 5th season.
book, which is amazing. Like I
So
love it.
fucking good. Yeah.
Of basically like court wizards that are like, you only get to do this one thing because you serve an important function, but it's dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like, I mean, materialism and waste, like, not to get too like real world political, is an act of violence, right? Like, it is an act of disharmony. It's an act of throwing things out of sustainability and violence. And I feel like if the source is at the center and heart of this world, it's like the beating heart and consciousness of this world that we're like really tuning into an aesthetic of like deep connection to the natural world as well.
Yeah.
Anything out of balance with that, of course, it's going to like lash out. It's like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like an immune system attacking, you know, a tumorous cell or something. It's just like gonna get you.
Oh, I like that image.
Yeah, I feel like this is playing to your strong suit, Gian. You should do that. Gian
Cool.
does a lot of working with the land and like games around the natural world. So yes to that.
I have very strong feelings about things like recycling and littering. So this is fine.
But yeah, it speaks. I can totally see, like, when we just build things for our own edifice, the world being like, what? What's that for?
Right.
As a sentient creature, it's like, you just took a part of me and you turned it into something. Okay, that's cool. But wait, what's it for again? Oh, it's to like look flashy. What? I love that.
Yeah.
Like, resistance to that.
Totally. And if I can speak to this just a little bit more, I think there's also something about that tunes into like how in our world, ultimately, like the natural world is going to adapt to however we fuck it up. It's us who's like not going to be able to adapt.
Right.
And so there's that short-sightedness that's present as well, right? Like the source is going to be able to handle whatever like wastefulness that this like system of oppression creates. But like the people living within this terraformed like culture might not be able to survive what the world does in order to thrive.
Yeah, I like climate change that can punch you.
Awesome. Yeah. And I think we might have already answered the next question with what we're talking about, because it's what did this outbreak by the source first change or disrupt when it appears? And it sounds like it may have just been that, like some patches of like terraforming, undoing, and just undoing that process.
I particularly would be fond of something that was invisible, like making the air toxic. And like, you don't need to do a lot to air to make it toxic. It doesn't need to be chemically changed much. So I like the notion that some of these things are like really big. Like there's a giant, like around all this very sleek and metallic and monochromatic buildings, there's like a giant red rock spire that just like shot up in the middle that they've never been able to get rid of. But other things being much more subtle, like, oh no, what if the air is bad? Because that's the sort of invisible factors are where lots of like superstition and like fear, because unknown can rise.
That's so good. Yeah, Sean, absolutely. Yeah.
Love it. So the last part for just detailing the world for the start is talking about technology a little bit. So the only two things that are definitely true about the setting is there's the feed, which is this just completely prevalent network of information and digital recording. And once something goes in the feed, you can't get rid of it. And there is sort of cyber limbs and some work around that. But beyond that, the sort of descent from or reaction to the outbreak and where we are now could affect technology in a lot of different ways. So one of the first questions is, what is the most advanced technology that's only available to the elite?
And like scale, like framework for this, I mean, we have terraformers and fabrication machines. So even though that technology isn't available to us anymore, it exists in this like universe. So the scale is pretty high, right? Like our capacity for the best technology could be teleporters or other kinds of anti-grav, bonkers pseudoscience stuff.
Yeah.
Or soon to, or not yet science, but will be someday science stuff.
Someday we'll figure it out. As long as it can't transport you off the planet, because that would break the quarantine, then it could be anything you guys can imagine, basically.
Something that only the elite have access to.
Immortality is an interesting, like basically something that would like stop all aging processes, like body reconstruction to like natural body reconstruction, where you know, sort of like a fountain of youth, where as long as you stay on the planet, you know, so long as you've done this, you don't age.
That's so like fucked up and so good. Like,
it creates like these long like legacies where people don't, you know, they have children, but then they don't age. So like, there's not like the old generation dying out. They're still around, and other people die, but if you're really wealthy, you don't.
Yeah, and the power and resources just stay locked within. Oh my God, that's so fucked up. That's awesome.
Well, and one thing I like about that is, so whoever the overseers that were sent to the world knew they couldn't leave again until the quarantine was lifted. So the Interstellar Union kind of sent not its best people, because they were the people they could like get rid of. So if those people are like, hey, we found a way to be immortal, we're never going to leave, that could be kind of cool.
God damn it. We haven't even created these people and I already hate them.
Oh yeah.
I already just want to eat them.
And was immortal bullshit vampires is what
I saw the too rich to die.
Yeah.
That's the hashtag for sure. Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, and I absolutely do not want it to be a natural process at all. Like, this is a very, very forced, you know, it costs an exorbitant amount and it takes a ton of resources, and it's only available to the, you know, select few.
Ugh, just get the guillotines right now. I hate them.
Yeah.
That's really good.
I'm sorry, John. I take a perverse joy out of watching your like hatred rile up for
I'm so invested in this game already. I'm so stoked. That's very, very good.
All right. So then the last question is, other than the feed, what is a technology almost everyone has in their own home? So this is kind of like the common technology. So like the smartphone of our generation, but whatever they have.
Right. But the feed kind of already is that. Like, it seems to me like the feed is already connecting everybody to everything.
Since we mentioned like messing with the air, maybe you don't necessarily wear it all the time, but you have like an air filter mask.
Oh yeah.
Just in case something goes wrong.
Yeah. It's easy to find them at like
Yeah, maybe
corner
even
markets and things.
to like step that up a tiny bit, like an environmental suit. Like maybe even like you can deal with, I don't know. I don't really. No, air mask is good because it's pretty mundane.
Yeah.
I like that. That's really good, Brian. Yeah.
Dig it.
All right, so that's kind of the sketching out of our world. And as we play, there'll be times I'll ask you guys for more details and we'll kind of fill it in as we go. But the next step is to create your team. So teams in this game are basically, you want to resist against the quarantine and the overseers, but part of this is you're going to decide what that means for your generation, what that actually looks like. And so you've joined together as a team because you kind of share some similar ideals, similar ambitions. And so a lot of the game is really about the team, even more than individual characters. So the first thing that you'll want to do is, decide sort of what your professional specialty is, because the only way to really gain influence in this world is to be useful to more powerful people. So this is kind of what you specialize in so that you can show that you're useful until you're powerful enough to start changing things.
Can I just pause to say gross and also awesome?
Yeah, that's really, yeah.
Very, very on the nose there.
Yes, I had that experience a lot when I create and run this game.
I feel like we're really embodying that thing that Karen says about how like good improv is obvious,
Right,
like,
right. We're not having to stretch very far for these things, right?
No.
Just like, what's shitty? Let's make our analog to that.
Totally.
So you can see the team types there. And really for this, it gives you a little bit of different abilities and starting equipment. And then when you take certain missions that line up with this, then you get extra XP.
Cool.
Well, every time I've played this game, we started as something else and ended up becoming cleaners because violence is what PCs are drawn to.
Yeah.
So with that said, I'd be open to trying not to do that. But...
Trying not to be cleaners. It may be because of Dogs in the Vineyard or Mouse Guard or other things, but the people who deliver the mail always strike me as folks who have to move between different worlds, and they have to be able to do so with a certain amount of nuance and elegance. Like you can't, if you've got to deliver messages from the leader of your outer ring community up all the way to like central command, and you have to like pass through various concentric rings, like you have to be able to like carry yourself with a certain amount of, finesse and civility, or the guise thereof, to sort of to make those like crossing boundaries possible. But it also gives you lots of opportunities to see like what's going on between the various factions and whatnot. So I would throw that out there as a possibility.
Yeah, I like couriers too, because especially if the world is like the ground is very dangerous because the terraforming is sort of being undone. Moving from city colony to colony would be a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
So,
oh yeah, like there might be, the biomes aren't all adjacent, so there's like a biome and then like the wild and then another biome, and so if you have to like travel from one to the other, there's like significant hazard in doing so.
And especially if there's like factions that have like arms technology at all, I imagine there's like very wild terrain, like harsh terrain of like little DMZs that are set up like geographically between area to area as well.
Like pseudo, like not quite a biome, but like they figured out a way to terraform it just enough to like hang out in Badlands. Cool.
Totally. Yeah. And also like by contrast, right, like the terrain that like is untouched because like people just don't go in between those areas, like those little no people's lands.
Yeah, I dig it.
All right. So couriers then. And one of the big things for the game is in the beginning, your team is bound by an ideal. This is something you value. And at the end of a session, we'll see, did you keep to that ideal or did you go against it? And if you went against it, it advances something called your conformity tracker. And as the GM, as you conform sort of and yield to this oppressive world, I'm going to narrate consequences back to you and kind of the campaign structure. And part of that is if you sell out this ideal, you get bonus dice. And so it makes things easier at different times. So you can see there's the short summary there. And then at the bottom of the document are the specific triggers for what that will do. While you guys look at that, I'm just going to get your team sheet up.
Cool. So I don't know if chat can read the text on the screen. I imagine it's kind of small. So I'm just going to read the names of them, which is Know My Name, Into the Breach, Say I'm a Dreamer, and If You Need a Friend are the 3 ambitions.
3 ambitions. I feel like maybe I'm looking at a different part. I'm looking at team types right now under couriers.
Team creation summary.
Team creation summary. My bad. Okay, cool.
Nice.
Yeah, and actually this is step number 2. I think Sean just jumped to number 3.
Got it.
Oh, you're right. I did. I'm sorry. I scrolled and then didn't pay attention. So ignore that, chat. I didn't say that. It's anarchy. The ideals are anarchy, common humanity, freedom of expression, individuality, peace, sustainability, and protest.
Just gonna word search anarchy. Oh, it didn't work.
Sorry, Bill Culp.
Are you in the right pop-up team creation summary?
Maybe. Oh, you know what, Cass? I have version 4.1. Maybe that's why I'm not finding these things.
Oh, yeah.
It's in the journal in Roll20.
Got it. Cool. I will find it there.
I can just pop it real quick.
Okay.
It should be on your screen now.
Cool. Awesome.
The corruptive
power
of Roll20.
Yes.
On people's screens, whether they want them or not.
This is my first time using Roll20. I fucking love it. It's really great.
I'm really glad you feel that way. I fight with it all the time.
Really?
Okay. But like constantly, but you know.
Okay.
It does a lot. It's pretty sweet.
This might just be like the bloom of novelty. Maybe in a month I'll be saying the same thing.
It does so many things, but how to get them to do them is sometimes just
sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
I mean, from these ideals, I like anarchy or sustainability. I think those sort of fit themes you've put out for this world.
Yeah, sustainability seems to be the one that's like most on the nose.
Yeah.
I like anarchy as well. I like just like, nope, it's just too broke. It's too broken to try and like reform it. Let's crack it all the way open and start it.
Yeah. I mean, I can see the two being really like complementary and symbiotic, right? Like it could be like an ideal of sustainability, but done through very intense dramatic means that do challenge authority and like live up to, or like as a value that we try to live up to, like the refusal of control of the environment, like maybe terraforming itself to us is like tantamount to sin in some ways.
Do you think that there are people, specifically like people who are tapped into the source, that have figured out a way that like you theoretically could live without the terraforming? Like, is my understanding like the world is, the environment is not like hospitable without it. Like they came here and, you know, there wasn't breathable air and there wasn't plant life, et cetera, et cetera. So do you think that it's possible that we either know a way or think we might know a way? I think it's conceivable to live on there without all the artifice that we brought.
Yo, I have an idea. As long as magic is like the thing, like one of the things that we're making really big within this world, maybe we don't know anyone directly, but we have like friends of friends or like a recently deceased great grandmother who like through magic is able to live like in symbiosis with the land in a way where they don't need terraformed air. They can actually just breathe it. And it's like all, you know, some people are like, oh, that's just a myth. Some people are like, no, I know somebody. But none of us know anyone directly who can do it. but the possibility seems out there.
So that's actually part of the world.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
Yay.
Planet-born, it's become kind of a superstition at this point, but it seems that when they die, they move to those other dimensions where the Kith are, so where those other dimensional creatures are. And part of the outbreak is they lost the ability to travel to those other dimensions easily. But there are still some people who say, oh yeah, no, I totally, because the dimensions blur with sort of your world, they'll be like, oh yeah, no, I totally talked to grandma. And there'll be some people who'll be like, that's a total superstition, or other people who'll be like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah. I like the idea that like I talked to grandma, but there's no way to prove it. Like I had a dream. I mean, I was talking to a coworker today and she's like, yeah, my mom had a dream where she talked to her sister. I'm like, cool. I mean, I'm glad that your mom like processed some things with like feelings about her dead sister. That's great. But that doesn't necessarily mean I believe that her sister is speaking to her from the afterlife. Right. Like, and so you can have these conflicting things of like, sure, that's what you think you saw.
Yeah.
That's fine, but there's no way to scientifically prove it. The feed doesn't capture it. I like the idea that dreams are one of the few things the feed doesn't capture. So there's no way to show that happens. Like you can't empirically with our systems of measurement, at least.
Oh, hell yeah. Do you think that means like among like the overseer class, there's like a real taboo against being that dude who's like, so I had this dream the other night?
I totally think it is. I think dreams are absolutely like valued as brain garbage and should never be treated. It's like an equilibrium where the guy's like, I had like a feeling, you know? I had a feeling.
Oh man, I love it. I just wrote down dreams are low class. I'm like, that's a new note for me.
That's too real.
Did you guys settle on an ideal? I was typing up some stuff.
I think we're still like, it's sustainability or anarchy.
Yeah. I think it should basically be like, what do we want like our end goal to be? Is our end goal to eventually be sustainable, or is our end goal to wreck the current power structures? Because we could still want the other thing as well. But like, what do we see as the final thing?
Just to read the triggers, especially since chat can't read, for sustainability, if they engage in destruction or waste, it increases their conformity. And if they invest in another person, group, or nature, it decreases their conformity. And then anarchy, if they try to control another or obey authority, it increases their conformity. And if they empower the irrelevant or challenge authority, it would decrease their conformity.
I want to do all of those things. All of them. The good ones, the bad ones. Well, the conforming ones, the unconforming ones.
It's hard.
That's hard. Yeah. Like, Adam suggests sustainarchy.
Breaking the system already.
I feel really like fuck the police right now, and so I'm very hey Alice. So I'm very anarchy is very appealing to me, but also Brian, you were talking about like not wanting to turn into the inadvertent cleaners, not wanting to turn into the people that are like murdering and causing mayhem. So
I mean, that is really fun though. Let's be real.
I was going to say, waste is usually easy for groups to do, but not destroying things is a challenge sometimes.
Yeah.
Craig, what do you think? What are your feelings?
I mean, those are the two big ones. I think I like, if I had to pick one, I kind of like anarchy a little more, just because we've sort of created this class that's immortal and is built around the system where it's hard to elevate yourself upwards. And so rebelling against them is something that I think maybe the lowest of low can't really imagine doing. And so we are people that could try to achieve that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I like that that's like complementary, but not right on track with what we've created so far. I think also like just kind of stepping outside of the world a little bit. Anarchy seems to lend itself to more like dramatic choices maybe, or like more obviously dramatic choices, but at least as a jump start to getting immersed could be good. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting question. Can these change over time? Can your group's goal? Can you be like, not we're playing one session, but like if you were playing multiple sessions, could the team's ideal shift?
So usually you keep the same one. However, if you're starting a new session and you haven't sort of hit that first corruption threshold, you could. But what you don't want to choose is be like, oh, this is too hard. Bad stuff just happened because we conformed a lot. Let's switch it. But what you can do is there's an advancement where you can get a second one. So then you can have both triggers. So you guys could become sustainable anarchists if we were to keep playing.
Yeah, there we go. Team goals. Okay. Awesome. This is what we want.
Nice.
Make this happen.
All right. So the next thing, which I think Sean was starting to read over, is so this is the group ambition. And what this is you're deciding what it means to resist in your generation and kind of figuring it out. And so these are like the 4 ways that your group can kind of do it. So just to review, Know My Name is about trying to become like a legitimate faction. So sort of building up your relevance and power that in some ways you kind of become that institutional power. Into the Breach is every campaign has a specific threat that's going to increase oppression and corruption, and your team could be focused on trying to slow down or stop that growing oppression. Say I'm a Dreamer, so you're focused on changing the world. In a campaign, when you get to the final phase, there's different resources you've built up so you can actually change things in the world. You could go back and change what the relevance factors are on the big end, or you could just create new factions and do all these things. So that ambition is saying like, hey, we want to change something fundamental about our world. And you do that by investing in your community. And then the last one, if you need a friend, one of the main sort of sources of power in the game is your contacts. And so you say, hey, we're just going to really invest in our contacts and our relationships so that we can all kind of take care of each other. So none of these mean you can't do all of these different activities, and you can change this ambition from session to session, but it's kind of what your team is saying initially, like, hey, I think this is how we're going to change the world.
Yeah.
Got it. I feel like achieving legitimacy and stability is not something we are overly concerned with.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I also don't think that like we're the best couriers of stuff. Like that is, I mean, I just paid like stupid amounts of money to UPS to deliver a darn parcel. Like being an established courier is sure legitimate, I guess, but I don't feel like that's our dreams, right? Speaking of which, Say I'm a Dreamer does though feel pretty like we want to change the world around us, and the fact that we've just sort of pegged dreams as being low class
Yeah.
is appealing to me.
Yeah, I like that a lot too. Sam a Dreamer is definitely the one that's pulling towards me from these 4. So
I'm into it.
What do you think, Gian?
I like it. I like how tangible it is too, potentially.
Yeah.
It also, I'm sure, is like in Cass's mind, like creating that seed of like, oh, cool, they're going to be really invested in like their neighborhood and all the people in it, and they're time to crush it. It's a lot of.
I mean, the best GM trick ever is to have the players create their own first problem. Like you've just described what sounds like a really bad situation. Great, let's play that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say to that end that like one of the benefits that we have of traveling is that we have access to sort of the other biomes, and we're not supposed to take stuff back, but like you bring a full cart of stuff to one place, you might as well bring a few things back, right? There's always that ability to smuggle things over. And so I think like, yeah, we may want to be one with the land, but in the meantime, we need to breathe and eat and have shelter and all these things. And so if there are things that our biome doesn't have in surplus or is wanting, like the ability to sort of bring those things back and take care of our community sounds cool.
Yeah.
I dig that.
And totally.
Awesome. So normally the next step is you would pick your safe house type, and there's 9 different safe houses, and it kind of determines what are some of the factions that are near you, what is your starting environment, both for a one shot and because some of the settings still in development, I kind of picked for you guys.
Cool.
So your safe house is going to be a capsule tower. And these are towers that are sort of sponsored by some faction. And it's a mix of, very compact residences, lots of opportunities to spend your money. Most people work for the company that they live in the tower of. And so for the game mechanics, oh wait, I did put it in a handout, the safe house. Let me just pop. So what this is when your team gets an advancement, you can invest it in your team and getting another ability, but you can also invest it in your community. And there are 4 different community traits. And so you can improve over time the sense of community, the material resources, the security for you and your neighborhood, and space is basically actual landmarks and things there. And so if we were to look at the other safe houses, you could see that they have different opportunities in terms of expanding this. So since you guys are a capsule tower, you can only get 2 space upgrades, but you can get up to 6 resources as you start getting advances. So it kind of shapes what you're able to do.
Cass, the intricacy of this is
It's amazing.
like how deep does this rabbit hole go is the answer is very deep.
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, Team Ambitions was added because there's so many different subsystems you can throw yourself into. So you guys are gonna throw yourself into your community with your current ambition.
Cool.
So the question though is, which faction sponsors your tower? So there's the Kurgan Multinational Corporation, just called the Kurgan Multicorp, and they specialize in weapons, and they were one of the original corporations on the planet. There's what's called Copper Press. They're a novelty company that's become very popular because they make paper products which can be destroyed and hidden from the feed. So people who want to have secrets have become very fond of paper. Starstream is like the major entertainment mega corporation controlling a lot of the feed shows and entertainment. Jet Foods were the first people to learn how to make food after the fabrication technology was destroyed. So they've kind of maintained a monopoly over food production. Metalithic Labs got a monopoly over medical care during the epidemic. Vaultdex is in charge of locking down all the astrotech and making sure people don't bring it back and get off planet. And then Premier League is the big sports faction. So they sort of control all of the competitive sports, but also have a little bit of organized crime going on in the shadows.
I mean, like you have to. Right? Like duh. They must. I think whatever choice we make, we should consider our role as couriers as like tied to that. So like if we are Kurgan Multicorp, then we are effectively arms couriers, right? Like we take the stuff from there or etc.
Is it like literally the postman if we go with, I can't remember which one it was, but
press.
the one that, the paper.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking is like we have paper and we can take it to people.
We're all Kevin Costner in the postman.
Oh God. No, please. Undo. Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, Control Z. How many times do I have to go back?
I take it back.
No,
I'm sorry.
What is said cannot be unsaid. It's what is known cannot be unknown. It's stuck in my head now. No, I think it's cool. Ken Hansen turns off stream. You choose copper.
Well, I think you guys are the office now.
That's it. Yeah, I think we ask you now.
I guess so.
Oh.
I mean, technically, you're not good enough to be hired by the office, like legitimately, but they'll hire you for small jobs.
Right.
So
I mean, that's,
oh my God.
Like you said, part of what we are doing is in order to like achieve our goal, our goal of anarchy is not one where we see like, let's just go break things because we know that would just get us all arrested. Like that wouldn't do anything. We're trying to subvert things and make our way up the ladder so that we can affect more change.
Right.
So like, we've got to do the job, or at least some version of it, or at least appear to. Yeah.
So in the office, we're like, within the Scranton branch, we'd be like the warehouse guys. We're not up in administration. We're just hauling stuff around, kind of.
So the next step is to pick a upgrade that your community starts with. There are a lot on there. So for the interest of time, I would say a lot of these are more long-term and downtime oriented. Let's see.
Can you pop that? I accidentally closed it. Can you show to players again? Because I'm not sure. There it is. Perfect.
Capsule tower, yeah.
Yeah, and if you click on the little magnifying glass, it'll bring it up to more readable size. Still.
So we're looking at resources, is that right?
I think we're looking at community, right?
Oh, community, my bad. Okay.
Any of the traits, which is why there's a lot. So let me see if I can find
yes, please pick one for us, Cass.
Security one is more mission oriented. So you could have extra heavy armor, but you increase heat because it's stolen armor. You can carry 2 free load of weapons. Let's see. You can have your vehicles perfectly hidden when they're parked. And trying to think, almost all of these are downtime oriented, so we could also just skip this step for now.
Okay. I guess actually I had a question. Is this session a one-off or is it a campaign? I realized I never asked. I'm not sure.
Well, it's funny you should ask, because I was going to ask at the end and be like, hey, a lot of what we're doing right now is just character creation. Do we want to play another session or so? Keep going. So
I'd be down if other people are. Yeah,
it would be
cool.
Yeah, Cass, is that something you're? I know that this is like a demo game to check out, but like, would you be up for? Usually I wouldn't decide this on stream, but hey, okay.
Sorry.
Hey, stream. How about this? We'll talk about it at the end.
I think that's a good idea. Yeah,
we'll figure it out that. Yeah,
might be
to be continued.
TBD.
Yeah, you have to wait to the end to find out.
Ooh.
So I'll just say that we will pick your safe house upgrade later if we do continue, because they are all downtime oriented.
Cool.
And we'll do that. So
cool.
You do get a first special ability. So the team sheet is in roll 20 on the page. If you kind of zoom in, you'll be able to read it more clearly. And so there's 7 special abilities. Most of them would come up in session. If any of the terms or anything is confusing, let me know.
How do I get? Oh, I can move the windows. Lit. Sorry. Okay. Team creation summary.
For abilities, I played in a team that had parkour, and that was a lot of fun.
That's awesome, actually. How did that? Can I ask you? How did that like manifest in play?
Basically, in order to get anywhere, we just parkoured instead of walking.
Yeah, we could take the elevator, or we could parkour after.
Or we could just parkour our way up there.
Isn't there an episode of The Office where they all injure themselves doing parkour?
Yeah, they all shout parkour.
Cool.
Parkour. All right. So Cass, what is the name of that handout? Because A, for some reason I keep accidentally closing it, or not accidentally closing it, but B, I'm not able to find it. So
so this is on the Roll20 screen, like the actual main screen.
Got it. There we go. Okay, and it was behind everything else. I see.
Yeah, so if you zoom in, this is because I have not added the team to the character sheet yet. I made the characters and then got burned out. So
I think delivery service is very descriptive of what we've described ourselves being. And since we'll start with no heat, that is like a built-in bonus that we're gonna have. I assume we start with no heat at least.
Yeah.
Yarn spinning is a strong one because it just gives us a bonus. It gives all of us a bonus dot. That's like a,
Yeah, I was looking at that. Yeah, the ones that don't super compel me right now are like under the table, just because that looks like a more long-term campaign useful special ability to start
Yeah.
with, you know?
Yeah. I think the same as supplier to the stars. Like
Yeah.
taking -1 heat is great, but I'd rather have something that like gives us a new ability or gives us a bonus to do something in game.
Yeah. So of the ones that I see that I think are good for a potentially like short span game, like 1 or 2 sessions, maybe 3, is like hit and run,
Yeah.
because awesome. Parkour and yarn spinning. Those look like very immediate in terms of like effect.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe delivery service. I'm like not understanding it completely. I'm like reading it 3 times.
Delivery just service just means like we have a different amount of heat depending on how much trouble we cause, and as long as our heat is 4 or lower, which is it starts at 0, so basically in the beginning it definitely will be, we get a bonus die for pretending to be ordinary people.
Oh, okay,
or
yeah.
looking. So it would be usable as well.
It would be, yeah. Okay, so those 4 are the ones that I think would be the most useful for how we're playing this game.
Cool. Craig or Brian, do you want to narrow down from those?
I mean, those all sound really good to me. Mechanically, I'm just curious though, how broad is attack in hit and run? Like, can you emotionally attack someone and then gain effect by running at them? Because that
does it count if you like charge up on somebody emotionally, like you go from 0 to 60 of like really calm and then suddenly like I'm really mad right now? Is that running up on them?
Well, sounds genuinely terrifying.
The broker can attack with their words. So, if you want to run at someone while insulting them, I think I would give that to you in that circumstance.
I think that is just like mic dropping somebody, like being like, here's the truth, you suck, out, and just like, like and like leaving them behind. It is a thing that Nadja would be very good at doing should she ever want to use her powers for evil or for harm.
I mean, sometimes you have to attack the man, so.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely want to attack the man. We also want to pretend to be working for the man. Vic Culp says drive-by insults.
Craig, what stands out to you?
Yeah.
I like delivery service a lot, just because that seems centric to what we're doing, taking something from one place to another, so that should always be useful. Our spinning seems pretty cool too, though. It just seems like something that's generally useful.
Yeah, I think both of those we'd be able to call on them often. I mean, like, there's a lot of cases where we're gonna be like, oh, we're just passing through, we're all people. And that would be useful on both of those. Why don't we do yarn spinning, because it gives everyone like kind of their own choice of what to put it in.
Mm-hmm.
Each person can.
I'm down with that. Yeah.
Well, so we will mark that, and then we'll come back to that when you guys create characters.
Cool.
So now you pick your team's starting reputation. So like you guys have just kind of moved into this capsule tower, formed your team, maybe had a job or 2. And the question is, how do your community view you?
When you say our community, do you mean the shitbags that we work for that like pay us and that we are ultimately trying to overthrow? Or do you mean the people that we live with?
So it'll be whoever you work for, but your neighborhood is actually a faction. So there'll be times where you can decide to work for your community instead of, say, like the, the weapons faction. You could work for like your neighbor's faction.
Right. Because ostensibly we live in the capsule owned by Copper Press and work for them. And Copper Press is one of the major big like 7 corporations, right? Like they're not people, just because we work for them, they're not people that we necessarily have a real, love in our heart for.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is this with Copper Press, or is this with like just the other workers and the other people that are here? Or is it all of the above?
So it's gonna be kind of anyone who would hire you.
Mm-hmm.
Mechanically, you get extra XP for living up to it, because it's like, oh, this person wanted to hire someone who's really subtle is one of them, or they wanted to hire someone who's like really disciplined. So it's kind of your professional reputation. So like
Got
the
it.
people who are hiring you, whoever they are, what they would expect when they get you.
Cool. I'd like to throw out a vote for tenacious, because I think if we're talking about traveling through these very hazardous, like non-geoformed spaces, that like, yeah, you may not like us, we may be rough and tumble, we may not be like the kind of people that you want to work with, but we'll get your package there. And if we are just known for not giving up on things, it it would probably excuse a lot of otherwise antisocial behavior that we might exhibit.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I like that one too.
Yeah.
I like that. We weren't breaking the rules, sir. We were being tenacious.
Right. Good job done. What do you think, John? Does that speak
I'm
to you?
into it. I'm into it also because it gives us like a personality flavor, I think, as a team as well. We're like these scrappy little terriers, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
I'm into
Nice.
it.
Yeah.
All right. So there's picking your starting name. I think I'm going to skip over that for now just because it's often easier to do when you've had a mission or two. If anybody has a great idea that comes up, feel free to shout it out. And the last part is, so you are going to have a starting relationship with two of the factions kind of in your general vicinity. So let me find. So these are the 6 that are around your area. And the only thing is that the relevance of your enemy has to be equal to the relevance of the person you have a good relationship with. So you can see there's 2 under relevance 3. So if you pick that, one would be your friend and one would be they don't think much of you. And then under relevance 4, there's 4 different ones. So you could pick any 2 of those to be kind of on opposite ends.
Cass, I just want to echo something that Adam said earlier in chat. Your Roll20 setup is awesome.
It is, yeah.
It is so extensive and well done.
Thank you.
First two, I think like Lafa is more of our friend, right? They seem to be. I mean, I don't know. Pet fights don't really seem like maybe something that really appeals to me.
Yeah.
Like pets, but not making them fight each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they're robot pets, if that changes things for people.
Sure.
Depends on how cute the robots are.
Right. Like they're invariably going to be coming anthropomorphic robots that we fall in love with.
Oh, sure.
Right. One interesting thing about Lafa for your guys' group is so the colony constructed basically this like energy barrier to try and keep out the worst of the source and the outbreak and the chaos. And they insist that you must have it there to survive. So they're arguing that that's basically PR nonsense and that there would be more land and opportunity for people if it was dropped. So as couriers, you might have been outside the barrier before. So you might have thoughts or feelings about that.
Yeah. I also like that line at the end, like recently their protests have turned violent. Like that is a way that we can, you know, as players, we're sort of like, are we violent? Like, aren't we? Like, we're not sure, but like there might be external necessity to act in ways that aren't in our characters' like initial wheelhouse. That seems like narratively pretty ripe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that seems like a good setup to me, having Lofta be our ally and Kennel Crew being our rival.
Mm-hmm.
Because the other thing is Kennel Crew is big about like being rebellious, and that could attract attention that maybe you guys don't really want put on you.
Yeah.
Sure. Like we might want that, but not in that form, and not, yeah.
It also seems vaguely like you know, like kind of wasteful. Like they're using all these AI that could be like set to like better use, but instead they're doing this
Right.
thing.
Robot battles.
Yeah.
Right. So while I get the last of sort of your team sheet set with that, the next part is character creation.
Cool.
Why don't we take, since we're jumping things, why don't we use that as a break?
Yeah, can we take like a 3 to 5 minute bio break? Is that cool?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
That
I
is
will be right back.
okay. Up. Okay. And we will see you all in a sec.
Yay!